Hello folks, the cat's out of the bag. The UK budget has been announced and I'm going to try and give you all the facts, everything we know about it, perhaps look at some of the things that are a little bit unsure at the moment. I'm going to try and keep the politics out of it and just stick to what's been announced. So the first thing is the pence per mile tax on EVs and plug-in hybrids. This is due to come in April 2028. It will be 3 pence per mile for EVs and 1.5 pence per mile for plug-in hybrids. Now, it sounds like you're going to basically forecast or guess what your mileage is going to be for the forthcoming year and pay that at the same time as you pay your vehicle excise duty, your road tax, your road fund licence, whatever you decide to call it. That's then evidently going to be checked once a year, which I can only assume is going to be checked at an MOT. It seems like it's fairly open to abuse. There is some sort of consultancy going on this whole thing, and the government have said it won't be measured by GPS or cameras or anything like that, but it feels like that might be a better solution than guessing everything. I know some people are very sensitive about personal data and stuff, and that's probably why they haven't gone down that route. It's a long time until it comes in. You never know, someone else might even be in charge by then. It could change, the goalposts could change. This is only on electric cars and plug-in hybrids at the moment, however, although it does feel like this could open the floodgates in future, perhaps. The next thing's the rising threshold for the expensive car supplement, also known as the luxury car tax. This will only apply to electric cars, and it will rise from £40,000 to £50,000. Obviously, when you're looking at a new EV nowadays in 2025, £40,000 is sometimes not a luxury car. Very often it's not a luxury car, it's a very normal average car. You could even argue at 50 we're not in luxury car territory yet, perhaps. This comes in from April 2026 though, so it's not an immediate thing. And I think we have to watch out for price creep, which seems inevitable, but there will be some manufacturers that have kept their prices just under that 40 grand mark that will now start to creep them up. I did go and do a review of an MG S6 the other day, and interestingly, as soon as you went into anything other than base spec, it went over the 40 grand. And I did wonder if manufacturers had been tipped off about this, because otherwise the pricing just seemed bizarre. So perhaps manufacturers have already been tipped off about this, maybe they've already got plans in place, but the danger is that we don't get the luxury car tax anymore, but the price of the car goes up a little bit. We'll wait and see how that plays out. Fuel duty freeze. The budget continues the freeze on fuel duty, which remains unchanged for the time being, offering a temporary reprieve to petrol and diesel drivers. However, media coverage suggests the 5p per litre cut from 2022 will begin to be reversed from September 2026. That's sort of hearsay at the moment. From what I understand, I think the fact is that fuel duty's not changing. It's just this new one on electric cars and plug-in hybrids. The government's pledged an extra 1.3 billion for the electric car grant. That's the grant you can get on a new car if certain criteria is met. There's an additional 200 million earmarked for charging infrastructure covering the installation of home, workplace and public charge points. And on top of that, local authorities and public bodies get 100 million to accelerate the installation of charge points where people live and work. However, there doesn't seem to be anything regarding cost controls on those public charge points. What we've seen in some areas is the government has effectively paid for lots of infrastructure to go in, but then once that infrastructure is in place, it's very expensive to use. The government's also extending its first year 100% capital allowances for businesses that buy electric vehicles, meaning effectively instead of writing the tax off over 5.5 years, as you would on a normal car, used car, if you buy an electric car, you can write off all the tax in the first year. There have also been a host of changes to the Motability Scheme, so removal of VAT relief on top-up payments from July 2026. Insurance premium tax exemption will be removed for most vehicles from July 2026. Removal of luxury premium brand vehicles from the scheme, so you won't be able to get like a BMW or a Mercedes. I can understand the feeling behind that, but it's not means tested. So does it matter what you're spending your money on? I don't know, seems like an interesting one. It looks like there'll be a reduction in the lease mileage limit under Motability, and that they'll be removing European breakdown cover, for example. It seems most of those changes to Motability only will affect new leases from the 1st of July 2026. So lots of grey areas around this, and obviously some clear mixed messaging where there's still incentives to get a new EV, but then at the same time they're bringing in new taxes for EVs. So a little bit of confusion generally around some of this stuff, and certainly the car industry hasn't reacted too well. Me as an EV driver, I've expected this to come in for quite a long time, and I don't have a particular problem paying some tax for using my car. It should be mentioned, however, that these taxes are on top of the existing taxes, and it's only this year that the vehicle excise duty was brought in for EVs, which is still 195 quid a year, when you could have an old diesel, for example, that's on 0 or 40 quid a year. So there are definitely some mixed messaging in here. One thing that wasn't covered, to best of my knowledge, is how the pence per mile tax will be charged for mileage that you do abroad. Lots of people take their car over to Europe. Will you have to pay for those miles in the UK? If so, that seems incredibly unfair because you're not using the UK roads at the time. The other thing that is somewhat unclear is what happens the other way round. What happens if Europeans are bringing their cars into the UK? If this is a tax on road usage, surely foreign vehicles coming into the UK should have to pay that tax. But how on earth that would be collected, and the possible cost of setting up some system to collect it, seems probably counterproductive. So I think there are still loads of answers required on that side of things, but we need a little bit more clarity, a lot more clarity. I think the major pros and cons, if you ask me, and these are my opinions, the main pro being, if you want to get into an electric car, that luxury vehicle tax threshold has gone up from 40 grand to 50 grand. That seems more sensible. Additional investment in EV grants, that's not too bad. Charging infrastructure and stuff, I think it's positive, as long as it's controlled afterwards, and I haven't heard anything to suggest there'll be any controls on those providers sort of after the installation. And I think for the majority of EV drivers in the UK that can charge from home on an overnight tariff, their pence per mile cost of using their cars probably still only going to be 5-6p, even with this new tax in there, which is significantly less than it would be using petrol or diesel. As for the cons, the pay per mile tax hikes the running cost of an EV, and some people will just see it as a new tax, and they'll look no further than that, and it will put them off getting into an EV. I saw a report yesterday where they predict this new tax will mean there'll be something like 1 million fewer EVs on the road in 2031, I think. I must admit, I've slept and I've forgotten the details of it. But a lot of people have, in the comments, the last video I made immediately says, I was going to get an EV, I won't now, because it's going to cost more, essentially. There's still a lot of uncertainty over how this tax is going to be collected and calculated and checked and verified. People could use all sorts of things, mileage blockers, all kinds of things could go on, and it could mean that you'd have even less faith in the mileometer reading on a used car than you do now. And if you're me, you have very little faith that that's true in the first place. So that could be a further problem. Also, the plug-in hybrid thing. How many people have plug-in hybrids and rarely charge them? I know some people with plug-in hybrids as company cars that have done it for the tax benefit, to have lower company car tax, but they very, very rarely charge the battery in the car. Obviously, they're going to have to pay 1.5p on every mile they do, and some of these plug-in hybrids can only do about 20 miles of all-electric range. So that seemed an odd one. The changes to the Motability Scheme are pretty emotive. I'm not going to go into that in too much detail. And then obviously just the continued mixed signals. We're being told to move into EVs on one hand, and then new taxes coming in on EVs all the time on the other hand. So there we go, folks. To the best of my knowledge, they are the highlights for how that budget affects the driver. What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. See you on the next one.
Huge thanks to all my channel members for your continued support. I really do appreciate it.